blackberry picking time in Southern Appalachia. Some years the blackberries are scarce and hard to find, but this year there's an abundance of blackberries in my mountain holler. Several years ago, Ethelene Dyer Jones, who grew up in the Choastoe section of North Georgia, wrote a guest post for me on the Blind Pig and the Acorn about looking forward to the first blackberry pie when she was a child growing up in Choastoe. Here's Ethelene's post. On the farm in the mountains where I grew up, we looked forward to the first ripe blackberries. If enough had ripened, it would mean a blackberry cobbler for dessert after we had picked, looked, and washed them. I don't remember any recipe for making blackberry pie. My mother knew how to do it, just because she'd done it so long. I remember watching her and then doing it as nearly she did as possible. Basically, it took a pie pan to place the berries in. I don't mean by this a pie plate like we used for making pies with a rolled out crust and a filling. A cobbler pie pan was a round pan about 8 or 9 inches in diameter with sides about 2 1/2 inches up and holding about 2 quarts. Put the washed and looked berries, making sure that no stems remain, in the pan. Cover with water and a little more than covered. Put in about 1.5 cups of sugar. Bring to a boil. Put in 1 teaspoon of vanilla. This seasoning helps to take the bitterness out of wild blackberries. Make pie crust, not the regular kind, but rich biscuit dough with more shortening than for regular biscuits. In those days, we used lard. Roll out the dough on a floured board until very thin. Cut strips of dough and drop about 2-inch lengths into the boiling berry mixture. Turn down heat, or if using a wood stove like we did when I was a child, move to a cooler part of the stove. Let this first layer of berries and dumplings cook until the dough is cooked through and set, and you still have plenty of juice, but it's thickened. Then roll out a thin crust and again cut strips, but this time lace them to cover the top of the berry dumplings mixture. If you have cream saved from milk, spread it over the top of the pie. Sprinkle sugar on top. Put in heated oven and bake until the crust is golden brown. Remove from oven. If you like it hot, spoon out a serving and enjoy. Or if you can do so, wait and serve for dessert after dinner or supper. You may have to experiment with this old-fashioned way of making berry cobbler until you get the feel of having the right amount of berries, water, dough for dumplings to thicken the mixture, and the top crust which you want to bake to a golden brown. The only drawback to gathering wild blackberries for making homemade jelly, delicious cobbler pies, and canning the berries for winter is all the chiggers caught while picking them. We used to rub kerosene on our legs and arms to try to ward off chiggers, but I still recall those little pests had a heyday with berry pickers' arms and legs. But our buckets of ripe, juicy berries were always recompense for any discomfort of chigger bites. Why don't you go berry picking and reward yourself and your family with this Appalachian treat, blackberry cobbler? I hope you enjoyed hearing Ethelene's words, hearing how she looked forward to that first blackberry pie of the year when she was growing up in Choastoe, Georgia, which is North Georgia, just a couple of mountains away from me in Union County. She was sure right about the chiggers. If you've never been bit by a chigger, be glad. Chiggers are bugs those bugs that you can't even see, but boy, they leave their marks on you, or at least they do me. I don't have to go berry picking to get chiggers. I get them anytime I go outside pretty much in the summer. Matt would tease me and say that that's because I'm so sweet. I don't know about that, but I know that I get a lot of chigger bites, and I've tried all kinds of different things to stop getting them. I've not tried, of course, kerosene. It's funny, Ethelene mentioned kerosene. There's so many old remedies you'll hear that have kerosene in them. I don't know if that's because kerosene was different in those days. It didn't have the chemical makeup that it does today, because of course kerosene is poison and you shouldn't put it on your skin and you shouldn't ingest it in any way or form. But that's a common medicinal remedy, or preventative one in that case, that Ethylene was talking about, that you'll hear from days gone by in Appalachia. Anyway, I have tried other things. The best thing I've tried, or I found with chiggers, is you just have to scratch until they're gone. You just have to live with them, and they're worse the first day or so. My mother-in-law, Miss Cindy, says that if you immediately come in and take a bath in salt water, that's what they did for her when she was a child, that helps. But I don't usually try that. Maybe I need to. Anyway, when I was a girl and Granny would go blackberry picking, she had a whole get-up that she would wear, and that was to help prevent chiggers. She would wear long pants. She would wear one of Pap's shirts. She would tuck the shirt into the pants. She would tuck the pants into her socks. And she'd wear a hat. She'd put her hair up or whatever and wear a hat. She'd have her buckets to put her berries in, and she would take a hoe, because another thing, if you're going on an all-day berry picking, a lot of times that happens is you run into snakes. So that's not always a happy thing, of course, especially if it's a poisonous snake, if it's a copperhead or something. So Granny would take that hoe with her. I wish I had a picture somewhere. I don't think there is one. I've never seen it, but I wish I could go back and take a picture of her whole get-up. She'd go, and she'd head off down the road, and she'd come back with the blackberries to make jelly, to make us a cobbler. Lots of good memories and good food in those. As Ethylene was talking about, you kind of have to make this cobbler a few times and just kind of figure out what works best for you. So I do, like Ethylene says, I don't have a pie plate that she describes, so I use a 10-inch frying pan, cast iron frying pan. I use about a quart of berries, and I use not a cup and a half of sugar, because she was talking about 2 quarts, so I don't use that much. You could really use the sugar to taste, to what your taste is, so how sweet you want it. Sometimes it seems like if the berries are really juicy, it's hard for me to get the juice to thicken, because you want it to be thick. So what I do is if that happens, if I put too much water, or the berries are juicier than I thought they would be, I use cornstarch. So you can use even up to 4 teaspoons of cornstarch. I mix it with water. I start out with maybe 2 teaspoons, and then add a little bit more if that don't work. So I do that to thicken my juice and my berries if it doesn't get thick on its own. Another thing, I do use biscuit recipe like Ethylene suggests. I use self-rising flour. White Lily's my favorite, and I use White Lily and whipping cream to make my biscuits. So I'll make up a batch of biscuits, a recipe, and instead of the first part, Ethylene talks about rolling it out thin and then dropping pieces in for your dumplings. Instead of doing that, I take part of the biscuit dough and I just do drops like you would make drop biscuits, except I'm dropping it into the boiling blackberries. And I do that part for my dumplings is how I do that. I let those dumplings cook about 10 to 15 minutes boiling in that juice. And then I do take the rest of the biscuit dough and roll it out thin, like Ethylene said. And then I make a lattice out of it and put it on top, just like she was saying. I trim, you don't have to worry about the size of the lattice, because you can trim the edges to fit down into your pan. And then those edges you can roll in sugar, make a biscuit out of them, do whatever you want to with them, and bake them separately. So I do that, and then I use whipping cream to brush onto the top, like Ethylene had that wonderful fresh cream when she was a child, but I don't have that, so I use whipping cream. And then I have a coarse sugar, like a dessert kind of coarse sugar, that I sprinkle on top. I bake it about 400 or maybe even 450 if I'm in a hurry, until the crust is golden brown, like Ethylene said. And it's just a really great cobbler. And I love knowing that Ethylene's mother made it, that Ethylene made it. She's a dear friend, Ethylene is. And that they looked forward to it each spring over in Choistoe. I love that today my family enjoys that old Appalachian recipe, and I know people made it in other places too, but thinking of Ethylene's post, she said it was an Appalachian blackberry pie, or blackberry pie. I love thinking about them enjoying it, and then all these years later, my family looking forward to that first blackberry pie or blackberry cobbler of the spring or of the summer. Looking forward to that all spring, checking the berries, seeing if they're ripe yet, seeing if they're still green, hoping this will be a good year for blackberries. I love that tradition that's went on for those generations. I just think that's wonderful. I hope that you get to eat some blackberry pie or cobbler this year. And as always, I hope you'll just keep dropping back by and helping us celebrate Appalachia.